I gave him my life, my love, my trust, and she stepped in and ruined everything I worked for. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I remember the day I moved to Chicago for Ryan. I left behind my job, my apartment, and even my closest friends. I thought it was worth it because we promised each other forever. At first, everything seemed perfect. Ryan was loving, attentive, and grateful for all the sacrifices I made. I believed nothing could come between us. But slowly, I started noticing little things that didn't feel right. He came home late more often, sometimes smelled different, and began making excuses when I asked simple questions. My heart would ache, but I kept telling myself I was imagining things. Then Vanessa appeared. I met her a few times at work events and parties, always friendly, always smiling at Ryan in a way that made me uncomfortable. At first, I ignored it, telling myself she was just a colleague. But over time, it became clear she was always around him, popping up at the same restaurants he claimed he was going to alone, asking about projects he hadn't mentioned to me. My stomach would twist every time I saw them together. Something in my gut told me she wasn't just a friend. I tried to talk to Ryan, gently asking about her and his late nights. He laughed it off, saying I was overthinking, that I was stressed from the move, that everything was fine. But the feeling didn't leave me. I started paying more attention, noticing patterns, little signs that something was off. I caught glimpses of messages on his phone, and though I didn't read them, I could sense the hidden conversations, the secrecy. I felt trapped between disbelief and fear. I had given everything to this man, my life, my time, my trust, and something in my heart screamed that he was slipping away from me. Vanessa wasn't just a friend, she was the wedge slowly splitting us apart. I had to figure out what she wanted and how far she was willing to go to take everything from me. It was painful, terrifying, and I felt completely alone in the battle I hadn't signed up for, yet knew I couldn't ignore. Every day became a test of patience, of observation, and of quiet strength. I realized that if I wanted to survive this betrayal, I couldn't act out of emotion. I needed a plan, clarity, and a way to protect what I had sacrificed. And that's when I started watching, learning, and preparing. The fight for my life and my marriage was only just beginning. After the first signs, I began noticing more details that didn't make sense. Ryan started staying late at work almost every night. He would say it was important meetings or extra projects, but sometimes I would hear his voice on the phone sounding distracted, even guilty. I tried calling him during the evenings, and many times he didn't answer, or he said he was busy when he clearly wasn't. Vanessa seemed to appear everywhere he went. At first, I thought it was coincidence. She showed up at the coffee shop he liked, the grocery store he visited, even at the small events where I was sure she had no reason to be. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was imagining things, that maybe he was just being friendly. I wanted to trust him. I had given my life to him, after all, and the thought that he could betray me made my chest tighten. But the feeling wouldn't go away. Every time he returned home smelling a perfume that wasn't mine, or laughing at a text I didn't see, I felt a cold pit in my stomach. My intuition screamed that something was off. The little excuses and innocent explanations no longer felt convincing. I tried to keep myself busy, distracting myself with household chores, work projects, anything to calm my mind. But every time I caught a glimpse of her name on a receipt or heard her mentioned casually in conversation, I couldn't ignore it. I felt like I was slowly waking up to a reality I didn't want to face. My friends told me not to jump to conclusions, to trust him, and to believe in the marriage we had built. I wanted to believe them. I really did. But the more I observed, the more I realized that something was happening behind my back, something I wasn't supposed to know. The unease grew with each passing day, a quiet warning that I couldn't brush off any longer. I began paying closer attention, trying to notice patterns in his behavior, the timing of his disappearances, and the ways Vanessa seemed to follow him without reason. The gut feeling that something was very wrong became impossible to ignore. It was no longer just suspicion, it was the first step toward uncovering a betrayal that would shake my life completely. One evening, I was tidying up Ryan's briefcase while he was in the shower, just putting things in order. That's when I found a folded note tucked between his papers. At first, I didn't think much of it, but when I opened it, my heart froze. It was Vanessa's handwriting. The words were full of affection and ownership, lines that no friend would ever write. She called him things like mine and "can't wait to see you again," and there were hints about plans and moments they shared in secret. I couldn't breathe. My hand shook as I read each line, realizing this wasn't just a harmless friendship. It was intentional, manipulative, and clearly designed to pull him away from me. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Every late night, every unexplained absence, every small excuse he had given me suddenly made sense. He wasn't busy with work. He wasn't tired from extra meetings. He was lying. Vanessa, the woman I had smiled at, chatted with, and even trusted to be polite and professional, had been slowly taking everything I had built with Ryan. She had inserted herself into our lives, gaining his attention and affection while I gave him everything. I felt anger rise first, hot and sharp, but it quickly turned into sadness so deep it felt like it would swallow me whole. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at that note, trying to understand how someone I loved could betray me so completely. I thought of all the sacrifices I had made, my career, my family, my home, and how easily they had been disregarded by the two people I trusted most. Vanessa wasn't just flirting, she was actively dismantling my life, piece by piece, with Ryan's cooperation. Tears blurred my vision, but amidst the heartbreak, a small voice inside me whispered that I couldn't just let this happen. I had to see clearly, understand the full extent of their betrayal, and figure out a way to protect myself. The woman I had once considered harmless was now my enemy, and the man I loved was no longer who I thought he was. This revelation changed everything. The life I had trusted and built was crumbling, and I knew I couldn't stay passive any longer. After finding the note, I felt like my world had completely collapsed. I couldn't stop replaying every moment with Ryan, wondering which memories were real and which had been lies. Every smile, every promise, every late-night conversation suddenly felt like part of a carefully constructed deception. I kept asking myself over and over, how could I have been so blind? How could someone I trusted so completely betray me like this? Sleep became impossible. I would lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Thoughts of the sacrifices I had made haunted me, moving across the country, giving up my job, leaving my friends and family behind. I questioned whether it had all been worth it if the man I loved could turn against me so easily. Even the small joys I had once felt at our life together now felt poisoned, tainted by the betrayal that Vanessa had orchestrated. I also struggled with self-doubt. Maybe I hadn't been enough, maybe I had missed signs along the way. I kept thinking about the countless times I had trusted Ryan, defended him, and believed in him, only to realize that trust had been used against me. The pain was overwhelming, and at times I felt paralyzed, unsure how to move forward. But as the nights stretched on, a slow determination started to grow. I realized that crying and blaming myself wouldn't change anything. If I wanted to reclaim my life, I had to act, but carefully. Impulsive reactions would only give Ryan and Vanessa more power. I needed to think, to observe, and to plan my next steps. I started writing down what I knew, what I had noticed, and what I needed to find out. I reminded myself that even though I felt broken, I was not powerless. I had sacrificed a lot, yes, but I still had my mind, my intelligence, and my strength. I needed to use all of them to protect myself and to make sure that this betrayal didn't destroy me completely. For the first time since discovering the note, I felt a flicker of control returning. I didn't know exactly how things would unfold, but one thing was clear, I would not let this betrayal define me. I needed a plan, and I needed it carefully, because the path ahead required patience, strategy, and courage. I knew I couldn't face this betrayal blindly. I needed proof, something concrete to show that Ryan and Vanessa weren't just hiding feelings, they were manipulating my life. I started going through bills, bank statements, and documents I had kept from before the move. I looked for unusual charges, transfers, and secret purchases. Every detail mattered. I even checked receipts and emails I could access legally, trying to trace anything suspicious. At the same time, I began keeping a journal. I wrote down every strange conversation, every lie Ryan had told, and every time Vanessa seemed to appear at the wrong place at the wrong time. Seeing it all written out made me realize just how carefully they had plotted. It hurt, but it also gave me clarity. I could no longer ignore what was happening, I had to act. I also reached out to Linda Marshall, my old mentor and someone I trusted completely. Linda had always been wise and practical, and I knew she could guide me through this storm. I told her everything, from Ryan's behavior to Vanessa's manipulations. Linda listened calmly, without judgment, and helped me see that I could respond with strategy instead of anger. She reminded me that dignity and patience were just as important as action. With Linda's advice, I started thinking several steps ahead. I made a plan to confront the betrayal, but not recklessly. I needed to gather all the evidence, understand the full extent of their deceit, and prepare a way to expose it in a way that would protect me and my life. I realized that rushing in without preparation could backfire. For the first time since discovering the note, I felt a sense of control returning. I had a direction, a method, and someone guiding me. I knew I couldn't undo the past, but I could decide how the story ended. Every lie, every secret, every manipulation Ryan and Vanessa had used against me was now fuel for my plan. I wasn't just a victim anymore, I was ready to take the steps to reclaim my life. By the end of the week, I had a clear strategy forming. I knew what I needed to prove, how I would prove it, and how to confront them in a way that would leave no doubt. The game had changed. I was no longer powerless, I was ready. I decided the next step had to be carefully planned. I invited Ryan and Vanessa to a dinner at our favorite upscale restaurant, framing it as a chance to talk and reconnect. I wanted them to believe I was hurt and confused, vulnerable enough to let my guard down. They had no idea that I already knew everything. On the day of the dinner, I dressed simply but elegantly, projecting calm and confidence. I made sure my expression and body language showed just enough sadness to make them think I was broken, but not so much that I looked weak. Every detail mattered. I wanted Ryan and Vanessa to underestimate me completely. When Ryan arrived, he smiled nervously, glancing at Vanessa for support. Vanessa was confident, almost smug, thinking she had already won. I greeted them politely, letting the tension simmer without revealing a thing. I ordered the table in a way that gave me control of the conversation, and I made small talk while observing their reactions. Every gesture, every glance, every slight hesitation was a clue to how much they thought they had me fooled. Throughout the meal, I stayed quiet, letting them speak first. Ryan tried to explain his actions, while Vanessa chimed in with light-hearted jokes, pretending nothing serious was happening. I listened carefully, noting every inconsistency and every lie. Inside, I was calm, but my mind was already mapping out the next steps. Every word they said would become part of the evidence I had gathered. I also made sure the staff around us noticed nothing, maintaining the appearance of a normal, peaceful dinner. I wanted the setting to feel casual, to lull them into a false sense of security. They had no reason to suspect that by the end of the night, the truth would hit them hard. By the time dessert arrived, I felt ready. I had set the stage perfectly. Ryan and Vanessa believed they controlled the room, that I was the one who was struggling, the one who was powerless. Little did they know, I was in full control. Every step, every word, and every move had been carefully calculated. That evening wasn't just a dinner, it was the beginning of their reckoning. I was ready to turn the tables completely, and they didn't even see it coming. By the time the main course was finished, I felt it was time. I took a deep breath and let my voice stay calm and steady. I told Ryan and Vanessa that I knew everything, the lies, the secret meetings, and the way they had tried to take my life and my trust for granted. I watched their faces closely, seeing their initial surprise and disbelief. I slowly laid out the proof I had collected over the past weeks. I showed bank statements with hidden transfers, receipts for things purchased in secret, and documents showing investments made without my knowledge. I even mentioned the note from Vanessa, the messages that proved their manipulation and intent. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shout. I just presented the facts, one by one, letting the truth speak for itself. Ryan's face went pale. He stuttered, trying to defend himself, but the words didn't come out right. Vanessa's confident smile, the one she had worn like armor, began to falter. I could see her realizing that I had planned this carefully, that I wasn't just exposing them emotionally, but with solid proof they couldn't argue against. Other diners nearby started glancing over, sensing the tension, but I ignored them. This was not about appearances, it was about truth and reclaiming control. I detailed how Vanessa had inserted herself into our lives and how Ryan had been complicit, letting her manipulate him while I sacrificed everything. Each fact hit them harder than the last, and the smugness that Vanessa carried began to crumble. By the end of the dinner, the room felt heavy with shock. Ryan and Vanessa tried to speak, but I remained calm and unshaken. I made sure to emphasize that betrayal is a choice, and the consequences are real. They had assumed I would be crushed, humiliated, or silent, but instead, I had used their lies against them with clarity and precision. When I finally paused, the silence was deafening. Vanessa looked at me, her eyes wide, unsure how to respond. Ryan's usual arrogance was gone, replaced by fear and regret. That night, I realized that presenting the truth with calm confidence was more powerful than any anger or revenge. The power had shifted, and they knew it. They had underestimated me, and now they were paying the price. After exposing everything at the dinner, I didn't stop there. I knew that simply confronting them wasn't enough. Ryan and Vanessa needed to face real consequences for what they had done. I began sharing the evidence with people who mattered in our lives, colleagues who had unknowingly trusted Ryan, family members who had supported both of us, and mutual friends who had believed his lies. The reaction was immediate. Ryan's reputation, which he had carefully built over the years, started to crumble. Colleagues began questioning his integrity, clients pulled back, and his credibility at work suffered. What once seemed untouchable, the respect he had earned, was slipping through his fingers. He realized too late that I wasn't just angry, I was prepared, methodical, and determined to ensure that the truth couldn't be hidden. Vanessa, who had entered our lives thinking she could easily replace me, was equally shocked. Her confidence faltered as friends and acquaintances began seeing her as manipulative and deceitful. The smile she had worn for so long disappeared, replaced by panic and regret. She had underestimated me completely, believing that my love for Ryan had made me weak and passive. That assumption cost her everything she had hoped to gain. I remained calm and collected throughout it all. I didn't raise my voice or beg for sympathy. Instead, I let facts and patience do the work. Every move they had made to deceive and manipulate was now turning against them. The control they thought they had was gone, and the humiliation was public, undeniable, and inescapable. As I watched the fallout, I felt a mix of relief and quiet satisfaction. I had taken the betrayal and transformed it into my strength. My patience, intelligence, and careful planning had outmatched their deceit. They had assumed that emotional pain would make me crumble, but instead, it sharpened my focus and gave me the clarity to act decisively. That day, I realized something important: betrayal might shake you, but it doesn't have to destroy you. With patience, strategy, and courage, the person who tries to take everything from you can be made powerless. Ryan and Vanessa had learned that lesson the hard way, and I finally felt like the balance had shifted in my favor. After everything was over, I realized that my life needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. The betrayal had left deep wounds, but it also gave me a clear perspective on what truly mattered. I began reconnecting with old friends I had drifted away from after moving for Ryan. Their support reminded me of who I was before the lies and deception had taken over my life. I also returned to the career I had once left behind. For years, I had set aside my ambitions to support Ryan's dreams, but now I focused on my own. I enrolled in classes, attended workshops, and slowly began rebuilding my professional life. Every small success reminded me that I was capable, independent, and valuable on my own. I didn't need anyone to define me or give me worth. living independently was difficult at first. There were moments when memories of Ryan and Vanessa crept back in, testing my resolve. But each time, I reminded myself how far I had come and the strength I had gained from surviving the betrayal. The pain no longer controlled me, instead, it became a tool that sharpened my judgment and determination. I also started prioritizing my own happiness. I explored hobbies I had abandoned, spent time traveling, and rediscovered passions that had been buried under years of sacrifice. Life felt richer, fuller, and more authentic than it had before. I realized that self-worth doesn't come from being loved by someone else, it comes from knowing your value and standing firm, even when life tries to knock you down. The betrayal had taught me resilience, patience, and the importance of strategy, but it also showed me the power of self-respect. I no longer feared being alone because I understood that being independent was not only possible but empowering. I had survived deception, humiliation, and heartbreak, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. Looking back, I am proud of how far I've come. I rebuilt my life not for anyone else, but for myself. I thrive on my own terms now, and every day I remind myself that the person who once tried to destroy me can never control my future. I am in charge, and I am free. Standing at the edge of this new chapter in my life, I finally felt the weight of the past begin to lift. The anger, the heartbreak, and the betrayal were still there, but they no longer controlled me. I had reclaimed my power, my dignity, and my peace. The people who had tried to destroy me, Ryan and Vanessa, were gone from my life in every meaningful way, and their hold over me had ended. I spent time reflecting on everything I had gone through. The lessons were painful but necessary. I learned that true strength comes not from seeking revenge, though that moment of justice was satisfying, but from rising above the situation and taking control of your own life. Every sacrifice I had made, every tear I had shed, had shaped me into a woman who could face anything with clarity and courage. Even with all the closure, I knew that betrayal leaves marks that never fully disappear. Sometimes a glance at the past, a memory, or an unexpected reminder can stir old feelings. But now, instead of letting them hurt me, I used those scars as proof of my survival. They were reminders that I had endured, that I had refused to be broken, and that I had grown stronger because of it. Life had become about me again, my ambitions, my happiness, and my freedom. I embraced opportunities one had once ignored, built relationships grounded in trust and respect, and prioritized my own well-being above all else. I felt empowered, not because I had punished those who hurt me, but because I had chosen myself. As I looked toward the future, I knew I would never allow anyone to take that power away. Some people believe they can break you, but only if you let them. I had learned that the hard way, and I would never make that mistake again. My past was a part of me, but it didn't define me. Now, I walk forward with confidence, aware that life will have challenges, but certain in my strength. I had survived betrayal, found justice, and reclaimed my life. And though the scars remain, they no longer hurt, they remind me every day that I am unshakable, unstoppable, and free.